I would like to just make the comment that house is more than just a pretty place to practice your Pinterest favorite things on, or your home is more than just what it looks like. That when you're thinking about what you want to build, you think about the safety factor and what you want between your children and Mother Nature. If Mother Nature gets mad and does some of the nasty things that she can do. So just give it a thought and just put that into your decision making whenever you're deciding what's the next home you're going to build.
Right, and our hearts go out to everybody in California right now, and anybody else that's ever been affected by a natural disaster. We feel for you, and we're always here to when you guys are rebuilding, and hope everybody is safe.
And all the people that are still recovering from Western North Carolina. As you know, that part of the country has been very near and dear to my heart, and seeing some of those floods that they've had has just broken my heart, because that's such a beautiful, beautiful piece of our country, and it's just devastating to see what they've been going through and trying to rebuild, and they've still have a long way ahead, and our hearts go out to them also.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Today, the discussion that we wanted to have with everybody is about natural disasters. Unfortunately, with everything in California going on, it's kind of front of mind. So we wanted to talk about how our log homes have performed in fires, in hurricanes, tornadoes, or earthquakes, and wanted to just give some stories of what customers have experienced in our homes.
Hi, this is Lynn Gastineau.
And I am Lacey Schmidt.
And this is the Acorn and Leaf Podcast. There's been a lot going on recently about, we're hearing about all these fires in California. And so I thought it might be a good idea for us to talk about natural disasters and how a log home is or is not affected by natural events that happen.
Yeah, everything in California is it's heartbreaking. Heartbreaking to see what's going on over there.
Yes, it definitely is. When people think about building a house, they think about a lot of things like what it's going to look like. They think about the design of the house. They think about what it's going to cost to heat and cool it, what it's going to cost to build. But I think it just gets back to basics, the fact that, what is a home? And what's the major function of a home? And to me, it's what I believe is that your major function of the home is shelter. It is to protect your family or whomever is living in the home. It's to protect them from Mother Nature.
Right.
Yeah, so that's something that people should be considering and thinking more of. So I thought it'd be a good idea if we talked about these things today. Since the California wildfires seem to be be on the headlines all the time and foremost in everybody's mind, I think talking about fire is
pretty relevant.
Yeah,
right?
Very relevant. Yeah. People think that because a log home is made out of wood, that it's going to be more likely to burn down.
Yeah, and I remember I've had some people even comment to me, this is just firewood, right? This house just firewood. Well, no, that's actually kind of the opposite of what it is.
Yeah. Well, if you think about if you're going to start a fire, what do you start it with? You start it with small pieces of softwood, kindling,
Mm-hmm.
which is, you don't want to use oak for that. You want to use pine or cedar or something that's going to catch
fast.
That's going to catch fire quickly. And then what do you put on top of the wood to make it burn slow?
Big old log.
Of oak.
Of oak, ideally, yes.
Yeah. If you have it, that's what you want. That's one of the advantages of oak log homes is the fact that it is so resistant to fire. But I mean, all log homes are because of the density of the wood. And again, most houses are built out of stick frame construction, which you're talking about 2x4s or 2x6s, which is obviously going to burn very quickly. And the other thing that people don't realize is that because you have studs that are like every 16 inches, that in between those studs, it creates really like a small chimney that feeds oxygen to the wood. So that if you get a fire in the wall, that's feeding oxygen, which everybody knows
Right.
fires
Ignites it.
they need oxygen
Right.
in order to burn. So so that's one of the reasons why log homes are so fire resistant.
We've had a handful of customers throughout the years that have their log homes, their oak log homes, have gone through the different natural disasters that Mother Nature brings at us, including fire. So, do you have examples or any stories of some of our homes that have caught fire?
Sure. I remember one house out in Kansas where they had a carport and their car caught on fire on the carport. And it burned the carport off. They had a full length front porch. It burned the end of the porch, but the log wall that was there, it really just charred the wall. Now it burned out the door and it burned out a window that was in that wall. But the good news is that that the time that lapsed from the time that the fire broke out, because it did not spread to the rest of the house, the family was able to get out of the house in the middle of the night without anyone being hurt. And that's the most important thing. You can
Right.
replace houses, you can replace all kinds of
Stuff.
things, but you can't replace people.
Right.
And the firemen told the family, said, if this had been a frame house, you never would have made it out alive.
Right.
You would not be here.
So it gave them time to wake up, essentially, and then get out of the house safely.
Right, and it did because it didn't spread.
Right.
And then the other great thing about it, all they had to do was they sandblasted the inside of the logs on the inside and the outside. They put in a new door and a new window, and voila, they're back in business.
Yeah.
And we had to replace their carport and fix their porch, of course, too, on the outside. But it was much, much, much less damage than what it would have been if it would have been a total disaster,
Yeah.
if total loss if they had a frame house.
What that shows in for our houses, whenever we have an attached garage, we have do a solid oak log wall between the garage and the house, and that acts as a firewall. So it is a code allowed, if you will. So a log wall meets code for a garage. So if you have a stick frame home, that wall would have to have fire rated drywall on it. But instead, in a log home, we do a full log wall, and that meets that fire code, which is exactly that example. They essentially that carport. I mean, it wasn't enclosed, but the same thing. They had a log wall there that proved that the firewall resistance holds up, and it gives you time, just like you would in a stick frame home. So I think that's really. I mean, that's a proof in the pudding kind of thing right there.
Right. An 8-inch thick log will meet fire code as a firewall. And that's one of the reasons, like you said, why we always put a log wall between the house and the garage, and highly recommend that, because it does a really, really good job of preventing, because a lot of times vehicles catch on fire. That's not
Right.
uncommon.
Right.
So
Yeah.
The other situation that, for example, we had a house that had the house was 25, 30 years old, and they had a fireplace that caught on fire in the middle of the night. Same thing. The people woke up, had enough time to call the fire department. Nobody was hurt. Fire departments told them that if this had been a frame house, you would have been dead. You would not have got out alive. And they had to pull the fireplace out and replace it with windows and everything. But actually, it was a much cheaper, easier fix than it would have been if it had been a frame home.
Right. And I know that's one thing that I always worry about, is because we have a wood burning fireplace. In the wintertime, we're burning wood all the time for heat, and it's always a concern whenever we're going to bed. Just that, because it's just, you never know. It's just very interesting,
Very important.
very important.
Yeah.
Right.
So that's one of the things. Fire. Obviously, we all hope we never have to live through that. But it can happen, and I've had actually also have seen houses, well, my own personal home, as a matter of fact. The outside of my house, obviously they're on one end of the house. We just don't have a lot of traffic at that end. And that's where the air conditioner units sit. And sometime, unbeknownst to us, that the breaker on the outside of that caught on fire. And just happened to come around and notice, and all around the box, it was all the outside of the logs were totally black.
I didn't know this happened.
Oh, I didn't tell you?
No.
It was totally black. I have no idea when it happened because it was during the winter time. It happened during that we had needed the air conditioner unit. And I think it was in the spring. We were just doing service work on it and noticed, like, oh my gosh. And it was out about maybe 8 inches circle around the box.
Oh my gosh.
And the panel box should have shut it off, but somehow it didn't.
Wow.
And it just charred the outside of the logs.
Well, world, you're hearing about this at the same time I am. This is my childhood home she's speaking of. So I have a little, it's near and dear to my heart. I did not know that happened.
Yeah.
But my goodness.
So if it had been a stick house, even I was with the AC guy whenever we saw it, and he said, wow, he said, if this had been a stick house, she said, your whole house would have caught on fire.
Yeah.
Got on fire.
Scary.
But all it was blackened it. And
Wow.
we just bleached it off and it was fine.
Yeah, cleaned it
so,
out.
Yeah.
Right.
But so anyway, and that's where we see most of the fires happen. It's believe it or not, it's from the outside of the home. So that's something that is really good about why you would want to build a log home. Another thing that happens a lot here in the Midwest is tornadoes, and also in the South. Now we've got a lot more tornadoes in the South, and also tornadoes sometimes happen while you have a hurricane. They'll also generate tornadoes. But we've had some interesting stories told to us by some of our past customers. One in particular was a family in western Kansas, and they had a home that was about 25 years old, and it was in a wooded area. It was actually right in the trees, and a tornado came through, and it was an F5, which is 200 and I think it's 200 mile per hour winds. F5 tornado, and it all it did to their house was it tore the roof off, the porch off. It had a shed porch across the front, shed roof porch, and it tore the porch roof off. Other than that, it really did nothing to the house. The engineer that came from the insurance company to inspect the home said that if the people had been home, they weren't at home, but if they had been home sitting in their living room, all they would have gotten is wet. Because when the porch roof got pulled off, it pulled off part of that living room roof too. So if they were sitting in their living room, they would have been perfectly fine. They just would have gotten wet.
Wow.
And to show the strength of this tornado, there wasn't a tree over 4 foot tall left in their woods. All of them were either completely uprooted or they were twisted off.
Oh my gosh.
They had a huge metal building next to their property, next to their home, with the poles were down in concrete, and there was nothing left but the slab. The whole metal building was completely gone. They had an old license plate that was on the wall in that building, and the wind was so strong that it literally drove the license plate into the concrete slab of the floor.
Oh my gosh.
And they couldn't pull it out. And they could not pull it out. So really, really strong tornado. So then we had another situation here in central Missouri that a home, and it was the exact same thing. It hit it, and it was a F3, almost an F4 tornado. And it came through, and it only took the porch off. But what's interesting, this porch had an exposed beam truss, one of our oak exposed beam trusses on the end of the porch. And the wind was so strong, it literally pulled the rafters that were above the truss. It literally pulled them through the nails that were attaching the rafters to the truss, and literally pulled the pine framing lumber through the nails. So the nails were still sticking down in the oak beam. The oak beam did not want to turn loose of those nails. And and it pulled it out.
So the truss was still standing.
The truss was still there.
The roof was gone, but the truss was still standing, and the posts, obviously, they're attached to the truss.
Yes. So
Wow.
the truss was sticking out in the middle of nowhere, and the porch was gone. But the thing with this particular situation, the gentleman had a crawl space, and he had no place to go, and he was awake. And it came through, and he was sitting in his living room, and he said, if I'd been in a frame home, I would not be here. I'd be gone.
We do want to point out, we do not recommend sitting in your living room during a tornado. Not what we're recommending. Yeah. If you live in one of our houses, find somewhere safe to go. Do not be in the middle of your living room if you're in a tornado.
But and he had the same thing. He had a huge barn where he kept his RV in, and it was completely gone, nothing but the slab. And he had a detached frame garage sitting next to his house, and it was all completely gone, nothing left but the slab. And he had a 26-foot enclosed trailer that was blown up into the trees.
Oh my goodness!
So they had to get a crane to come get his trailer and get it down. So.
And there wasn't there a stick frame house that was relatively close to him that was wiped away in that, right? Or the
house in Kansas I was talking about. They had a brand new home within a quarter of a mile of them, a brand new 4-sided frame brick home, and there was nothing left but the basement. Everything else is completely gone.
Yeah. And
their house was sitting there, nothing gone but the porch.
Wow.
So we've had some really interesting stories of tornadoes. We are here in central Missouri, but we ship houses all over, and we have had houses go through hurricanes and earthquakes. As a matter of fact, one year we had one on the East Coast that went through a hurricane and one on the West Coast that went through an earthquake, all in the same year.
Hit them both.
We had a house on Cape Hatteras, which is an island off of the coast of North Carolina, and this home was on right on the beach. And he sent me a picture of his house before the hurricane, and the houses were about 50 feet in between each home. And he sent me a picture after the hurricane, and his was the only home standing. Every other home was completely gone.
Wow.
Not a thing left.
My goodness.
So
that's heartbreaking.
Yeah, it is heartbreaking. Now, of course, when you're doing in your hurricane areas, you have to use hurricane ties and everything for the roof. Sure. and all that.
Right.
But it certainly attests to the strength of the house.
Right. That's amazing. Yeah. I lived in Texas for 17 years or so, and in Houston. So I've been through several hurricanes, and they're just like any natural disaster, they're not fun. And but all you hope is for your house to still be there. We luckily had a pretty big hurricane that our house is high enough off the ground that it didn't get affected, but a lot of our neighbors did, and it's just the whole experience just so heartbreaking and humbling, and so anything to mitigate any of that risk is you do it many times over.
Yes, yeah, and it's one of those things you don't think about until you have to live through it.
That's exactly right, and it's like it's not going to happen to us,
right.
and because nobody wants to think that way. Nobody wants to. You don't want to assume anything, especially terrible like that. So, but it's real. It is very real.
And this is one of the reasons why I think log homes should get discounts on insurance, because they are safer homes for people to live in, and they're easier to fix most of the time. Sometimes insurance companies don't realize that, but they really are. Even floods, one of the things that we do in our construction is one of our specifications is that we literally have a J-bolt put into the top of the foundation so that our first row of logs is bolted down to the foundation. And so it is going to hold that house in place, and that absolutely is going to help with in any situation that you're in, particularly with seismic for earthquakes. Having the house attached to the foundation is going to be very helpful. And so that's one of the things. But I think people ask me, why is a log home stronger? Why does it hold through these things? And it's a couple of things that I think are pretty obvious. First off is the corners. In a frame house, you've seen a house, they frame it up, they put some studs up, and they put some plywood on the corners, and that's their corner. When a log home, all your rows where they connect are all interconnected. They're overlapping each other. They're screwed together. They're glued together. They're connected. So you have an extremely strong corner. So that helps keep the house in one piece, which is, it doesn't tear, the wind doesn't tear it apart. And then the other thing is the fact that how the logs go together when they're stacked, again, they're glued and screwed together. And each log is connected to each other.
Right.
So there's just a
solid wall. There's no space like you have between studs. It is a solid log wall that's not going anywhere.
Just the way a log home is made is what's going to make it so strong. And then, the oak obviously is much stronger than other wood, so it's going to hold better. And this example of the framing lumber, the framing nails that pull through the framing lumber show that the oak doesn't want to give up on those connectors.
Right. It is hard. It is hard.
It is not going to pull out. Yeah. It is not going to pull out. Yeah. So
it's can be a pain when you're hanging something on the wall, but great if you ever find yourself
you have to drill your holes, but
right. Yeah.
I always say it's great for guys that like dead animals all over the wall because you can put an elk, you can put a caribou, you can put a bear, you can put anything up on those walls, and it's going to hold it. No anchors needed. No drywall anchors needed.
Right. So what about the earthquakes? How did the house that with the earthquake?
It did great. And it wasn't right in the middle of the worst part of the earthquake, but it was outside of San Francisco when they had the earthquake around the time of the World Series. Anyway, it was, and it had very little damage. It had, and again, I think it's because of the way the logs are made, they just hold together better. They don't pull apart. That's and it went through it with no problem. And that's the only one I know of about an earthquake. Is that one situation?
Sounds like overall the safest place to be is a log home if you've ever faced with any of these natural disasters.
Yeah, I've always people. We had neighbors that live in frame homes, and they've had tornado warnings out, and our neighbors don't have a basement, and so they came. Can I come hang out in your basement? And I'm like, if I get a tornado warning, I don't go to the basement. My house is fine. My house would take care of me. So neighbors come over, I got to go to the basement with them.
Just to be safe. You got to.
To keep them, to be hospitable and neighborly, to be neighborly.
Right. Yes.
Okay. Well, I think that's kind of, we've covered every natural disaster. I don't know, other than maybe being attacked by zombies or attacked by the militia. You can't shoot a bullet.
Right.
Most bullets won't go through a log wall.
Right.
So if you're worried about your neighbor coming over and shooting at you, if you can stay within the log walls, that's a pretty safe place to be.
If you say no when they say they can come over during that tornado, if then they shoot at your house, you're fine.
Right.